we always ask you about the latest, the off-the-field stuff, the latest contract dramas. And interestingly enough, names are still firing fast. And it is a case of January specifically linking back that probably a name that came out there, Victor Osimhen. And he was written about when it talked around strikers that Liverpool could be looking at this summer. Victor Osimhen, David, are you shooting this one down like all the others, do you reckon?
Well, I wouldn't doubt for a second, by the way, that he's someone you kind of keeping an eye on. Great goal record, decent age. You know, I think he would work in the Premier League, absolutely. But I'm just a little bit, you know, there was all the talk, wasn't there, about his kind of wage demands, and you know, if they are outrageous, I just don't know how Liverpool can kind of get there if that is the case. You know, maybe he's lowered his wage demands. You know, maybe a season in Turkey has made him kind of think, well, you know, I do want to get this move. I want to get there. You know, I want to get to the Premier League, and obviously a move to Liverpool would be very attractive. So maybe that would have changed things. But if his wage demands haven't changed, then I just, you know, it's just not very Liverpool, is it, to do this? So, you know, it's not one I'd kind of completely rule out, but I think there would have to be some shift on his side to make that happen.
Even with a year left to go on his deal, it's just the only thing we look at the moment, and it was something I want to ask you about, with the forwards, that elite forwards are hard to come by, goal scorers anyway in that regard. And the ones we've been linked with, like an Isak and Alvarez, the money being asked for them is absolutely exorbitant. But with a year left to go on his deal, do you think if it was something around, I don't know, 50, 60 million, even if it is big wages for someone who knows how to score goals and has a proven track record in multiple leagues, it could be something that could tempt them?
Yeah, I think if it fee wise, I don't question that. It's just that kind of wage thing, you know, is the real issue around it. I think fee wise, it would be reasonable, and you know, you're looking out there on the market for kind of number nines who might be there, might be available for Liverpool, because they're definitely going to sign one this summer because Nunez will leave. Then, you know, there are question marks over a few of them, aren't there? You know, you look at Gyökeres, for example, and you're like, well, you know, he scored in the Championship, yes. He scored in Portugal, yes, but can that translate to the Premier League? That's you know, he scores a lot of penalties. So will his non-penalty goals, will they translate? You know, that's a big question. And then, you know, some of the other names that are being bandied around as well. I think, you know, Isak, probably ungettable. Ekitike, we've seen players score in the Bundesliga and then maybe not be able to translate that to the Premier League. Physically, is he quite there in terms of holding off defenders? So there's just loads and loads of question marks over a lot of them. And I think Osimhen is possibly closer to kind of one where you'd say he probably would score goals. He looks a safer bet. So, you know, I don't doubt really that if Liverpool think they could do it at reasonable wages and reasonable transfer fee, that they'd be kind of, you know, he'd at least be on the list. But, you know, it's just those wages if they kind of come to a more reasonable level, or a level that Liverpool are willing to get to.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. And yeah, all the package, and people will mention injuries as they're doing in the chat panel as well. And not a forward, but an attacking player, another name that, one, I've got to be honest, really intrigues me. Been mentioned a few times, but stories around Antoine Semenyo, the Bournemouth winger, all the physical attributes I think are superb. Do you think he is one, or have you heard anything on him at all?
Yeah, I think he'll be liked. Again, he's kind of, you know, I think every player who's kind of performing as he is in the Premier League, so they've got that experience. He's around that age. He's got great physical quality and quality of his feet. There's just an awful lot to like about him. So, you know, he again, you know, hearing that he's kind of someone who's being linked and they kind of like that doesn't surprise me at all. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's one of those who's kind of on the cusp of really exploding and could be a top player for a top club. You know, he's got very much kind of Sadio Mane vibes to me. So, wouldn't be surprised at all if he's on the list. But again, you know, a lot of that it counts on kind of, is Luis Diaz going to leave? And, you know, that is a possibility. But I'm sure if Luis Diaz did leave, he'd be in the mix. You know, he's a player who kind of ticks a lot of boxes, definitely.
Kind of has that feeling, Semenyo, will be on the list, but probably not right at the top of it, but definitely in the mix, as you said. And maybe this one is an ultimate manifestation, but people took a lot of what David Ornstein said in his Q&A the other day and mentioned that Morgan Rogers has got a lot of admirers in the big boys in the Premier League. And Kamara there as well mentioned. Villa's financial issues. I mean, there's talk they're even going to sell their women's team to themselves to sort of balance the books a little bit as well. Morgan Rogers, for me, is a superstar in the making. I'm probably certain this is going to be a no, but can't see it, not heard anything.
No, not to be honest. And I'm a little bit skeptical about this one just because they've kind of got Szoboszlai and Elliott in that position at the moment. So, say Elliott could leave, by the way, that's very much a possibility. But are you kind of signing someone who bumps Szoboszlai out the team, or are you thinking that you can develop him and get a little bit more out of him? I'm not so sure really with that one. I think he's a fantastic player, but I'm not massively convinced that kind of position for me at the moment is number one priority coming into this summer. I mean, there's so much else to do, isn't there, really? I mean, they're going to need a left back. They're going to need a Joe Gomez replacement. They're looking like they're going to need a Trent replacement. They're looking like, could they need a Salah replacement? Hopefully not, but same with Van Dijk, obviously. Definitely Núñez replacement, possibly a Diaz. There's just so much there, and that's before you'd almost think that all those issues that are going to come up this summer are much bigger problems and things that Liverpool have to solve before they start saying we can upgrade on Szoboszlai. And I think people could argue that possibly they could do, and I wouldn't disagree with that argument. Maybe, and maybe that's an area Liverpool could strengthen. They've got so much else to do that for me are further up the priority list that, I'm not sure they would get into kind of the bidding war around Morgan Rogers, because if he does become available, I expect that's what it will be, because he's an absolutely fantastic player. He's English as well, homegrown, so that will bump his fee up. So, there's a lot more to do, I think, before they kind of start looking at that position.
He has played 15 on the left this season, or coming in from. I honestly think he could be a superstar, but I can't ignore the facts around all those things you said as well. And the other thing that people pounced on, I've got to be honest, I didn't like this at all, what David Ornstein said. And it's not that he's confirming anything, but he was asked in his Q&A, are Liverpool target any midfielders? And if so, what names have been floating about? And he said, doesn't seem to be a department at the top of the priority list. And if that's the case, you can understand why. Zubimendi was viewed as a market opportunity, and that's why they didn't pivot to another target. It's he who they wanted. And with, Gravenberch, everyone else's outstanding season, it doesn't look like it. I'm a bit worried by that. I mean, I hope that's false, because we've talked about this. It's absolutely nothing new. That midfield right now has done very well, but it lacks physicality. It really does. And sometimes a bit of cuteness, to get the ball through as well. If there wasn't a bit of a change in the midfield, combined with the fact, I've got to be honest, Arne Slot seems to trust four of them pretty much as well, surely a midfielder's got to come in.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility, but I'd agree with what David's saying there, in that, and I think, again, we've kind of discussed this previously, in that I don't think it's going to be Carlos Baleba. I don't think it's going to be someone he's signing who's like a nailed-on starter. I think what's going to happen is, there's a very big chance that Endo leaves, and you need to bring someone in to kind of supplement that, to come and take his minutes up, but also probably be a bit closer to the competition and make it a genuine rotation. But I don't think it's going to be a superstar. I think it could be someone who brings some more physical qualities and is a bit better on the ball than an Endo. But I don't, in terms of it being a priority, I'd agree with that. I think again, like I said about, attacking midfield, I think similarly for midfield in general, I think there are just bigger issues in this team that need sorting first. And a rotational midfielder is not kind of in your top three issues that are coming into this summer for me, really, that Liverpool have to solve. So I think it's something they could address and possibly will, because I think Endo will leave and want more minutes. But it's not, like I say, I don't think it's a top three issue, and I don't think the player they're going to sign is going to be a nailed-on starter to suddenly bench a McAllister or a Szoboszlai or a Gravenberch, to be honest. I think the ideal would be that it's someone who can kind of play a few of the positions and can come in and out, but he's a bit closer to what the manager wants than what he's getting from Endo at the moment. So I kind of agree with that, really. And I just don't think we've seen enough this season to think it should be the number one issue. I think, if you can add physicality with that rotation option, fantastic. And I think it improves Liverpool. But a kind of a starting nailed on midfielder, I can't really kind of see that. I can't see any of this 3 getting completely pushed out the side by anyone.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see people, the transfer talk. All we can pretty much lead into is I think we're all going to be surprised if it isn't a busy summer, departures and incomings either way. We'll have to see where it starters, squad players, or what. Time will tell on that one.